I'm Freeman Allen, and I'd like to welcome you here this evening for the 90th in the series of sustainability dialogues, which this evening is going to be a forum where the candidates for the Claremont City Council are going to say a few words about their thoughts and answer your questions. Our hosts this evening are both Sustainable Claremont and the Claremont Heritage. And the moderators for the evening will be Steve Sabaker, who's the Executive Director for Sustainable Claremont, and Dave Shearer, the Executive Director for Claremont Heritage. And also thanks to the League of Women Voters, who were a great help in arranging this and are handling the questions and the timing as the meeting goes on. As you see, all the candidates are here. They're seated in the order that they'll be on the ballot, which was selected statewide. The questions that you ask should be sustainability or heritage related and have something to do with City of Claremont. But I think you'll find that almost any question you can think of has a heritage or a sustainability component, so don't feel too constrained. The cards will be collected, sorted by the League of Women Voters, given to the moderators who will ask the questions. And we ask you this evening, please, not to show any favoritism for any specific candidate. And now I'll just turn it over to the moderators who will tell you about the format for the evening. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As Freeman mentioned, my name is David Shearer. I'm the Executive Director of Claremont Heritage. I'm with Steve Sabaker, the Executive Director of Sustainable Claremont, and we will be your moderators this evening. I'd also like to thank the League of Women Voters for overseeing tonight's proceedings and their very valuable help. Let's get started. If you haven't already done so, please silence your cell phones. Candidates also. You really can survive for about an hour and a half, I hope. Please notice where the exits are. We've got exits on both sides of the room, and the restrooms are located in the lobby just to the left. Tonight's forum will be recorded, and at some point it will be published on the web for everyone to view. Before I explain tonight's format, I want to just reiterate what Freeman said in terms of the goals for this evening. This forum was organized not only for the constituents of Sustainable Claremont and Claremont Heritage, but the community at large. On the question cards, you'll see two boxes at the top. One is for sustainability, and the other one is for heritage preservation. Feel free to check those boxes if your question relates to one of those two, and that'll make it easier for us to read the questions. We're going to be switching off. If you feel your question doesn't relate to one of the main topics, please feel free to ask it anyway. And our question sorters will direct it where they feel it is most appropriate. Please, only one question per card. If you need additional cards as the evening progresses, please notify the card collectors that are in the green shirts on either side of the aisles here, and they'll be walking up and down, and they can supply you with additional cards. Candidates, this is what we're looking for from you. We want to discuss what you would do to address the question or issue that is raised. Not what you think your opponent will do. Your opponent can speak for him or herself. Audience, these candidates have decided to run for office to represent you. That takes courage. It means that all of us will be respectful of every candidate on this stage. We expect all of you to act with grace and decorum. There are no political agendas this evening. We want to listen to what every candidate has to say about the issues that are raised. I know it is easy to get excited about your candidate and want to show your support with applause or shouting out, but with our limited time frame, we must try very hard to be as quiet as possible so everyone can hear the questions and the answers. Finally, to everyone here tonight, I thank you for the questions that you're going to ask, and we will try to get to as many of them as possible. I want to explain a little bit about the rules tonight. As Freeman mentioned, the seating order was decided in the way the candidates will appear on the ballot. We do have all 6 candidates here tonight. Each candidate will be given an opening statement of 2 minutes, and we will be starting with Zach. After the opening statements, we will begin our question and answer period. The questions will be sorted to eliminate duplicates and to make sure they are addressed to the entire panel and not individual candidates. Each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to the same question. We will start the first question with the first candidate, Zach, and we'll follow left to right. And the second question will start with the second candidate, and so on. Candidates, please keep an eye on the timers. Can you just raise your hands, located in the front? They will hold up a card at 30 seconds and a stop card at the 1 minute mark. This is for the questions. Please wrap up your last comment when the stop card is raised. We'll try to cover as many issues as time allows. And at the close of questioning or so, the candidate, will probably be about 8:15 or 8:20, the candidates will then have a 1 minute closing statement. That's it. And now I'd like to introduce your candidates tonight. And would you please stand as I read your name and remain standing. And audience, please hold your applause until all the candidates have been introduced. First, we have Zachary Corser. Second is Michael Ceraso. Ed Reece. Doug Lyon. Jed Leano. And Jennifer Stark. Okay, now it's time to have some fun. And I'm going to give the first question to Steve while the question people are kind of evaluating things. And then I'll ask a question, and then hopefully there'll be some audience questions that we can get right into. Thanks.
And thank you again, candidates, for being here. The first question is oh, I'm sorry. That's right. We need to
Yes. Oh.
That's right. So
Yeah,
why do we start with, we're going to start with Zach. That's right, exactly, already. Let's start with Zach. 2 minutes?
Yes, we're good. Thank you, Zach.
Well, I'll try to make this as snappy as I can. I'm taking off my jacket. It's a little warm in here, and I'm sorry about that, and I promise we'll make this as entertaining as possible, or as engaging at least. Hello, my name's Zach Corser. It's a pleasure for me to be here. It's also a pleasure to see that so many of you came tonight. We had a blockbuster turnout for Active Claremont Forum, and I'm seeing that it's turning into standing room here at this forum, so it's very exciting to see the engagement from the community. I come at this from being a member of the board of Claremont Heritage. I feel very strongly that what makes Claremont really a great place to live is, and a big part of our quality of life is the environment that we live in, that includes things like, trees and our natural surroundings, but it also includes the sort of architectural heritage, the history of our town, the thing that gives it a kind of distinctive richness that we need to preserve even as we move forward and think about developments like Village South. We need to do so with a clear picture in our heads of what Claremont means to us. And I'm here as a candidate to help support that. I don't have very much time for an opening statement, but I do want to talk about one issue, and that's the budget. I do want to say that I will continue, or as I have been as a chair of Traffic and Transportation, to think about sustainability as being a priority, even in tight budget times. But I think there's ways out of these difficult situations, and I'll give you an example. Traffic and Transportation just worked with staff on a complete streets policy that helped us to get a $7 million grant as part of SB1 funds. That'll help us do things like installing bioswales, planting carbon sequestering trees and shrubs, planting native grasses, taking stress off of our general fund and making Claremont a more sustainable place to live. I think there's more ways to do that in looking into grant funding. I think the city can do more to assist not only staff, but groups like Sustainable Claremont and Claremont Heritage in seeking out this kind of funding. And being on the inside of Claremont Heritage, I know there's grants out there, and I want to work more to make those grants available to these kinds of groups. So thank you very much. Looking forward to talking more to you.
I didn't know that Bob is going to be the person holding up the stop sign, so now I'm a little even more nervous. Hi, Bob. Hello, my name is Michael Ceraso. I'm running for Claremont City Council. Just give you a 30-second background in my organizing experience. Before I became a political organizer, I started off as an activist working for Greenpeace. I started around 2006, and I was raising money for them for a couple of years. Being the street canvassers, I'm sure you saw when you go walk by Starbucks and you see people with clipboards and they say, hey, do you have a minute for Greenpeace? And you're like, yes, maybe, no, or walk right by. I was one of those individuals. I learned a lot about activism and renewable energy and the challenges that came with it. And what I mean by that is convincing individuals that climate change is a very big deal. In Claremont alone, by 2050, we're going to see temperatures rise here by 3 degrees. And by 2100, we're going to see those temperatures rise by 7 degrees. So we need to make sure that the policies that we put forth here today, or put forth in the next couple of years, are not only thinking about what we're doing for today, but what we're doing for the next 20, 30, 100 years. A couple of things that I really want to touch on tonight is sustainability, making sure that we meet and reach this, the goals in the sustainability plan. I think it's one of the most beautiful plans that I've ever read from a city, so I want to hopefully have an opportunity to highlight on that. The second is the cost of urban forestry. We need more trees, but we need to make sure that we are able to afford and take care of those trees. We currently have 25,000 trees that are worth about $87 million. I want to make sure those trees are taken care of, and then consider what we need to do to continue to plant and grow. Third is bikes. More bike lanes. I think everyone will agree here that we need more bike lanes. We need those bike lanes to connect. And fourth, regional leadership. And I want to really stress this, that even though Claremont is ahead of the curve in the region, and we're doing an excellent job putting forth strong and thoughtful strategies, we need to support our regional friends and our neighbors in Pomona, in Laverne, et cetera, to make sure that they have the support they need so they have better air quality and stronger infrastructure. Thank you.
Good evening. So I'm going to start with a little bit, a lot of people in the room, some know me, some don't, so I'll start a little bit about me and a little bit about sustainability and some of the goals and challenges that I think the community will be facing. Myself, I'm the son of an immigrant mother. We moved around a lot as a child and kind of struggled through childhood and through that process with a lot of moving. From there, I started my business 19 years ago. I started a technology business on a desk in the corner of my bedroom and kind of got involved in the community here as well, being recruited by a Fortune 500 company to run a pilot here in the Claremont Village. When I got here, I fell in love with Claremont. I made Claremont my home. And like all of us here, I want to continue to improve and better our community. I've been involved in a number of civic, community, and cultural groups, including the Finance Committee for Sustainable Claremont, being chair-elect of the Chamber of Commerce, and chair of the Police Commission. I think there's a number of opportunities in our community in regards to sustainability. We have issues with the shot hole bore. We have issues with only 5% of our consumption being used through solar. I think we have issues with prolonging and maintaining our community sensibility. How do we do that? How do we take the small town feel we have today 20 years from now and keep that 20 years from now? So I think there's a lot of opportunity. I look forward to talking more about that as we go through all the questions this evening. Thank you.
Well, I'm Douglas Lyon, and I'd like to thank Sustainable Claremont, Claremont Heritage for sponsoring tonight's event, and thank you all for coming to listen to us tonight, and hopefully we can make it worth your while. We're talking about a lot of issues in Claremont these days. We've got a $49 million budget that is in structural deficit, as we're being told. We have employee pension unfunded liability of about $50 million. But there's an issue that particularly motivates me, and that is, speaking on a broader level, it's the physical character of Claremont. Some writers call it our sense of place. Those attributes that have been valued by so many of us over so many years. The trees, the small town feel, the pleasantly human, personal scale of our civic environment, the low stress, the low crowd character of our city. Those things, some of them more, intangible than others, but nevertheless important, that give Claremont a character unique and distinct from other cities. The question is, will these characteristics be assured and valued into the future? Will they still be available to future generations for them to enjoy as we've been able to enjoy them so far? As many people tell me, those are the reasons they moved here to begin with. Does this mean no new development and no changes at all? No, it just means developments and changes need to fit in with the existing traditions and scale of our city. In this regard, we should ask ourselves, are we a town that's already comfortable with itself, or are we striving to morph into something we've never been? My goal, personally, is just to assure that Claremont is a pleasant place to live. That's what I'd like, while at the same time meeting all those other challenges.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jed Leano, and I'm running for Claremont City Council. I want to just take a brief moment to introduce myself to you. My wife and I, my wife Liz is in the back with our son Wells. He's 4, so if there's any noise from a child, it's him. I'm the one responsible for that. And in 2011, my wife and I, we moved to Claremont, and we chose Claremont to start our family. And just as much as you are counting on your council and trying to decide who will lead this city, I should also tell you that just as you're counting on candidates and council members, we're counting on you, because we chose Claremont to raise our son here. And I want to raise my son in a community that is inclusive, that is forward-thinking, that is beautiful, that is safe, that has good schools. And I believe that I'm running for city council because we have a handful of things that we need to deal with and handle right now. We need to build a new police station, balance our budget, fix our unfunded pension liabilities problem. But I also think that we need to think about the future. We need to think about a future in which we preserve our urban forest, in which we enact policies that combat and fight against the effects of climate change. And I believe that my generation will be singularly judged by the way that we were told about global climate change and how we chose to respond. I'm happy to be here tonight as a candidate, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you all for having me.
Thank you so much to Sustainable Claremont and Claremont Heritage. And I'd just like to repeat our collective thanks to you all for coming. It's amazing. So I'm going to use this time to talk about myself. In my mind, this is a job interview, and you all are interviewing us for the position to serve on city council. There's 3 open seats. So I'd like to tell you about my experience, my deep understanding of Claremont, and some qualities I think you should know about me. I think it's important that you all know that I am a worker and that I'm dedicated. I'm a dedicated and reliable volunteer. I've missed one city council meeting since November of 2016. In 2017, I was a League of Women Voters, I was a League of Women Voters observer for the Pomona City Council meetings. So from May 2017 to May 2018, I went to about 4 city council meetings a night. So that either means I really like meetings or I'm willing to sacrifice my time to the democratic process. The Traffic and Transportation Commission has given me the opportunity to participate in the community process. Being on the boards of Claremont Heritage and the Friends of the Claremont Library have given me experience in leadership on the community level. I'm a volunteer for Sustainable Claremont, and I love this type of community involvement. I'm an active Kiwanian. I don't only participate with my time, but also, oh, there we go. Thank you.
Great. Let's have some applause for all our candidates. And just a polite reminder, if we could keep our applause until the end of this evening, we have a lot of questions to get through, and I know there's a lot of excitement in here when folks say something that really resonates with you, but if we can allow the candidates to speak, it gives you more opportunity to learn from them. So we're going to start with the first question. Each of you have 1 minute to respond. And the first one's actually on sustainability. Go figure. Claremont's Sustainable City Plan is held as an example for many like cities throughout Southern California. And some of you mentioned already, has over 250 initiatives and objectives. However, those initiatives and objectives are underfunded and behind schedule. In the current budget climate, how will you ensure that sustainability is prioritized, and how will you ensure that the plan meets its deadlines and objectives in the next 2 years? Zach?
Well, I think I anticipated this question a little bit in my opening statement in the sense that I will still, and the City Council, make sustainability a priority, and we shouldn't always think of this as sort of, sustainability versus the general fund. Again, there are many avenues for funding to look for that are built around sustainability. And I think, a smart staff, an engaged council, an engaged community can be a part of that process for seeking grant funding. About our plan, though, I would say, I did this at the last forum, I did it again. I looked at our sustainability report card, and on our city website, it's still 2014. We should at least see the latest report card up there. And to me, that shows a kind of lack of attention. The other thing that I think our sustainability goals need are an update. It's been since 2013. And I think part of this whole process, it's been 5 years now, is thinking about, what goals we want to achieve, how has science changed, how has the city changed, how has climate change affected things, and build that in so we can have attainable goals. But that takes constant gardening, and that's something that I'll do on the City Council.
I think there are 250 initiatives in the sustainability plan, and I think we need to go line by line and take a look and have a logical conversation about what can be done and what cannot be done. I think the biggest challenge in this city, for me at least, from my perspective, is the outreach element to what we need to do. If you're looking at water conservation, if you're looking to the expansion of renewable energy, if you're looking to conservation at our parks, Claremont trails, we need to take a look and see what we are capable of doing and which groups we can mobilize and support as a city government. Sustainable Claremont, for example, is an excellent group, but they have 3 staffers. They're going out very frequently and educating people on how to take care of their trees. We need to figure out how to empower these organizations to expand their base and support. That's the same as the League of Women Voters. We need to empower them and see what we can do and work with them to expand their base, their volunteer base, and mobilize individuals to have conversations about conservation, renewable energy, and how we can create more revenue to solve these issues. Thanks.
There's not enough time in a minute to answer that question, but I will touch on a few things that Let me start with our sustainable plan is out of date and does need to be updated. I do know that to update such a plan will take city staff approximately a year to complete. But it is a priority. It is necessary in our community for our community to get that plan completed. I did look at our 2016 report card, and we are lacking in areas in regards to water conservation, and we have plenty of opportunity in regards to electrical consumption. I joined Sustainable Claremont as part of the Finance Committee because I am passionate about making sure that we have the funds necessary to move the objectives and goals and missions forward for Sustainable Claremont. I think there's a way to do that with being efficient with the dollars, the community itself, the city itself being efficient with its dollars, looking at other vendors, other landscapers, other opportunity to save money in the area of maintaining our urban forests. Thank you.
The sustainability plan is rather huge, and it does have a lot of items in it, and not, practically speaking, not everything can be funded. Not now, possibly not even never. It's going to have to be part of the budget analysis that we're going through. The budget is going to be tight for the next few years. Sustainability projects are in what we call the discretionary part of the budget. Basically, the money that's left over after all the required spending is covered. For example, police and our employees and insurance and utilities and all of those sorts of things. So there are going to have to be decisions made. We're going to have a conversation on prioritizing the list, figuring out what is really the most important thing to the community and move those to the top and try and get those funded, as well as engaging with as many volunteer organizations in Claremont as we can in order to achieve things that can be achieved without city funds.
I want to thank you for the question, and I think this brings up an immediate need and a point that we need to address right now. I think that there are things in the city that we need to address now, and I think there are things we need to think about for the future. With regard to our city plan, we have a lot of items in that plan, and they're everybody's responsibility. And when something is everybody's responsibility, it's nobody's responsibility. So I think we need a little bit more direction on how we assign the tasks in those plans, number one. But number two, I also think that moving forward and trying to think of new programming outside of things that can be funded from the budget, there are businesses and people here in this community that want to participate in programming, that promote sustainability, that don't always necessarily require an investment out of our city's general fund. And I think we should pursue what those options are.
Our general plan is a plan for the future. And without sustainability, we don't have a future. So I think that sustainability should be, in my ideal world, not only would a planning commission be required by law, but a sustainability commission would be required by law, because we have some threats that entire cities and policies and budgets need to be behind in order to keep moving forward. So in terms of prioritizing the list of things on the sustainability list, I think that by engaging our community and engaging all of the other agencies in the city, that we could move forward at a rapid pace. I don't think that we should take things off the list. I think we should look creatively how to get to all of those things by
Thank you.
Thank you.
You feel free to finish your thought even when the stop sign is up, even though it's Bob Garricky holding the stop sign, which is very intimidating.
It's scary, I know.
I just want to remind everyone that if you want to ask a question, that the people in green have cards, and just raise your hand, get their attention, and they will pass you a card. They'll also pick up the cards that are available. If you can keep the questions generally towards sustainability or heritage preservation, that'd be great, but we will entertain other questions as well. I'm going to ask a preservation question. Last year, then Mayor Larry Schrader convened an ad hoc committee to explore developing a preservation ordinance and design guidelines, really to reflect the goals and policies relating to the heritage preservation element in the general plan. Do you support a preservation ordinance for our community? And we're going to start this with Michael.
Yes, I think we need to be able to balance between the past and the future when we're looking at Claremont. I think the niche businesses here, the architecture that we all fell in love with, from the Victorian homes to the craftsmen, to the Russian district, those are areas that I want to protect. There is nothing in me, if I am elected to city council, that I would want to change any of that. And I think we need to make sure that our laws reflect that. We need to balance between the past and the future, though, because we are going to have some development that's going to come in here, and we're going to have some changes. But any new development, any new changes that we have that comes into this community, I want to make sure that it is in line with the goals in the general plan.
So it's a great question. The straight up answer is yes, but in regards to, I talked about it earlier, the sensibility of our community and how do we balance the small town feel we have today as we grow and continue into the future decades from now. I think we do need to be creative with our development. I think there's plenty of opportunity to be creative in that process. We're not going to stop development from happening in regards to providing home and housing for new families, young families, and our older adults. It is necessary. So how do we do this successfully? How do we do this and preserve the values and the feel, the uniqueness of Claremont? And I think there's an opportunity to do that, and as a city council member, I will work hard to complete that.
On the Planning Commission, I've been talking about a preservation ordinance for quite a long while now, and not just on the Planning Commission, but with Claremont Heritage and, well, just about with anyone else who will listen. In the Village South Specific Plan, I did a partial rewrite of the goals and principles, guiding principles document, and I inserted a historic preservation paragraph in order to promote historic preservation as we get into Village South. Unfortunately, that didn't make it into the final draft, but it was an attempt. The city has an ongoing committee right now to define neighborhood guidelines, and a part of that committee's work is the drafting of a historic preservation ordinance, and I'm told that that committee is moving forward on an ordinance right now. So hopefully we will be seeing something in the near future.
I am absolutely interested in pursuing a preservation ordinance. Can't commit because I haven't seen what that legislation would look like or how it's affected by regulation or legal precedent. But I certainly want to see that, and I want to give an example of how our community could have used an ordinance like that had we had it. The debate over the moving of the Renwick House and the placement of the Pomona College Museum of Art, if we had had a preservation ordinance in place at the time that that project was being considered, certainly the consideration of that project relative to a standing and legally passed city ordinance, that discussion could have come out completely differently. And so I'd certainly be willing to listen to discussions on an ordinance.
I would 100% be behind a preservation ordinance, but I would hope that it would be, and I would like to be a part of having it be a flexible ordinance so that, like in terms of Renwick House is still standing across the street. And so I think that the ability to be collaborative really important. What I think that a preservation ordinance would help do would be to empower the community process, to move what the community wants to maintain and sustain and preserve by ordinance. I should have a better ending, but thank you. I'll work on my transitions.
You know, Claremont's ahead of the curve on so many things, particularly sustainability, but we're kind of behind the curve, ironically, given the preciousness and the uniqueness and how much of the character of Claremont is wrapped up into this idea of preservation issues. We're really behind the times when it comes to thinking about a preservation ordinance. Now, Claremont Heritage has done a really good job. John Newber, for example, who's a leader in Claremont Heritage, is part of creating these neighborhood guidelines. I think we absolutely need a preservation ordinance to preserve the character of the community. And I shouldn't think that it has to be thought of as a binary kind of decision, you know, homeowners versus the ordinance. I think the process that's been going forward has been very open and fair and thoughtful on this point in particular, that, you know, you don't want people investing a lot of money in design plans or changing their home and then not really having any guidance. It's actually very helpful to have guidance and put that out there for people. So this is kind of a service that we need to provide, that we're really behind the times on, something where we're actually catching up to other communities like Sierra Madre or Pasadena that have similar heritage and similar architecture. So let's continue to support that process.
Thank you. All right, the next question is on sustainability and on trees. Between the years 2011 and 2017, the city lost more trees than it replaced here in our community. How do you plan to address the decline of trees in our neighborhoods and maintain the city's namesake as the city of trees and PhDs? And we will start with Ed.
Thank you. So the city does have a huge asset in our urban forest, $87 million asset, over 25,000 trees. It's under attack. It's under attack by age, the aging trees that we have. It's under attack by the shot hole borer. And there's a huge opportunity to preserve and maintain this. The problem is this borer is attacking our native trees and not our exotics. I do know that we need to have a plan in place through our updated sustainability plan to address these concerns in regards to the attack on our trees, the age of our trees, and continue to figure out how we can maintain the canopy that we have and the urban forests that we have. Has to be done in an ongoing basis, just like it happens in Mother Nature. Trees after trees after trees, year after year. So I think there's an opportunity to do that in our community.
The loss of our trees is due to several factors. Number one, some of them are not getting watered anymore. As people transition to drought-tolerant yards, sometimes the trees lose all of their watering and the trees just die. And unfortunately, it does cost the city money to come out and replace those trees. And unfortunately, not everybody is very diligent even in watering the replacement trees. So we do have a challenge even amongst ourselves to value the trees and just do our part to water them. But on top of that, we have, as Ed mentioned, we have the shot hole borer who is attacking sycamores and live oaks, as well as all of the stone fruit trees, or many of them. So that is a big problem. It takes a lot to address that. That takes money, and that takes money away from planting new trees. So we have a lot on the table when it comes to trees. But I'm hoping we can find money to take care of that.
So the question that's being asked is, what do we do to make sure we are able to properly preserve our urban forest? And we're not going to be able to answer this question unless we truly understand the problem. Right now, we don't have an arborist. We don't have an arborist. We had an arborist working for Claremont. His name was Ian, and he was doing a great job, and then he left. And then that job was unfilled. And the Community Services Department was waiting for an applicant who was qualified to manage our urban forest, and we didn't find the right applicant. And then when the budget crisis came, and we had to pass a one-year balanced budget because we were under financial duress and we had a long-term structural deficit, we left that position unfilled because the Deputy Community Services Director of our Community Services Department is by trade an arborist. So if you want to know how we can solve this problem of properly taking care of our urban forest, it is fixing that budget. Because the reason we don't have an arborist is because we had a balance of one-year budget.
Fixing our budget and prioritizing reforestation. Investing in our trees is the same as investing in our economic growth. People come to Claremont for a reason, and we should take stock of those reasons why people come here to shop. Our trees are iconic. And so as we invest in reforestation, we're also investing in our economy, which is boosting revenues for our budget.
I think two keys will be education and data science. I was talking to a colleague of mine who's on traffic and transportation, Julie Madero, who's also a professor at Harvey Mudd. And she led a student project this summer to actually identify trees in Claremont, to actually have a record of what kinds of trees and where they are in Claremont so we can keep track of our urban forest. And also educate the owners of these trees about what kind of care they require, how much water they need. So we can keep track of sort of the inventory of this, because the trees, they may be a sort of community asset, but they're on individual property. So education is really important. We need to let people know how to take the best care of this. The other part of the education thing, though, is as we move forward and we're planting new trees, we need to be, educate homeowners, and when we're thinking about our own projects, think about choosing trees that fit with our climate. There's a sort of pastiche of trees in Claremont, and some of them are very thirsty and don't really fit into this climate. As we move forward, we need to think about trees that fit with our climate so that they're more, well, frankly, sustainable. And I also want to brag on Julie and Sustainable Claremont that project was a part of Sustainable Claremont, and so thanks to them.
Working in the environmental movement for 3 years, I saw too often candidates who run for office and say to environmentalists what they want to hear. I hope to not be that candidate. We need more money to take care of our government services, to take care of our trees. For every 18 trees that we plant, that costs $618. Do the math, double up, triple it up, quadruple it up. That's a lot of money that we're putting into planting the trees. Then for a tree to fully grow, for some of them, it takes about 30 years to actually get to full adulthood. So we need to think about taking care of that tree for 30 years, which means, as Zach just said, we need to have an outreach program where we teach people, this is a community responsibility as much as it is a city government responsibility for every tree that we make sure that we take care and water those trees. And we need to have a realistic conversation, like Jed pointed out, where are we going to get the money? How are we going to cover this? And we need to be honest with you, because right now we don't have the money to cover all the government services to take care of the trees. Thanks.
The next question bridges the gap a little bit between sustainability and heritage preservation. Following the state relaxing laws on secondary dwelling units, or ADUs, accessory dwelling units, or granny flats, the city is bringing to the council recommended changes to our local codes. Concerning granny flats, what is your position? And we're going to start with Doug.
The municipal code currently covers accessory dwelling units, and it covers it in a somewhat conservative way so as not to encourage an abundance of these, because in my personal opinion, I'm not in favor of more accessory dwelling units. They do change the character of a neighborhood. Having essentially two residences on a single lot, it does change the look and the feel and the character of a neighborhood, and I am not in favor of them. Unfortunately, the legislature passed a law that said we have to make it we have to open it up. We have to make it easier for accessory dwelling units to be built. So we're just wrapping up a process at the moment. It's going to be coming back to planning at the next meeting, in fact. A rewrite of the municipal code ordinance for accessory dwelling units that's going to set the new rules and expand, you know, the zoning areas and the lots that can have them and how big and all that sort of thing. So come if you're interested.
I think that the discussion on accessory dwelling units is a critical component and possibly one of the ways that we help make sure that we can continue to provide affordable housing options, particularly for senior citizens who want to age in place. And I believe that we can actually make sure that we have more accessory dwelling units by putting in smart planning principles so that we don't change the characters of neighborhoods while still offering more affordable units throughout the city.
Everything that's alive changes, and so the resistance to change to me seems a little, I don't know, nerves, right? You know what I mean. I am very much in support of the auxiliary dwelling units. I think that this is a way to diversify our housing stock, to provide housing for an aging population who chooses to age in place, and baby boomers who are about ready to retire and are ready to right size. I think that there are ways to collaborate and to cooperate and to make changes that will work for everybody, and to also understand that transitions are difficult, and to provide space and the right kind of time and listening to the resistance that accompanies change. Thank you.
I think the ADU issue is representative of a statewide problem, which is a housing crisis, a housing shortage. And what we're finding is that as this crisis gets worse, no city is exempt, because if we're not able to solve these problems on the local level, they're going to get imposed on us by Sacramento. This is one example. There may be others coming. You may have followed that bill that came through the legislature that was going to really open up development in relation to even bus stops and where they're placed. So we need to take care of this problem. We need to look towards it. In Claremont, there's a number of different things to think about in terms of developments and housing that work for us and fit our field, that aren't sort of cramped and cookie cutter, but fit in Claremont's environment. But in terms of the ADU issue specifically, let's work through this process. We have to comply with state law, but let's make it sure that, for situations like parking, the character of the community, that this, whatever comes up, works for Claremont and preserves Claremont's heritage.
This is one of my favorite questions. I 100% believe that ADUs is part of the way we solve the affordable housing issue here. And how I propose that we pay for future ADUs is actually to take a look at our Airbnb stock and short-term rentals that we have in this community. I mean short-term rentals where people are renting out spaces in their actual homes, and looking at ways that we can tax and take a TOT, a transit occupancy tax, the same way that we tax customers who go into the Hilton, and use that money to redirect it and subsidize the permit process to make ADUs cheaper. So if an individual wants to build their own ADU, and we're taking this tax, we use that money to subsidize that to make it cheaper and more affordable for the homeowner to actually build it. And I think this is one way we do it. And the other part of that is there is grant money out there right now. LA County has several grants that are available that would also help subsidize these type of programs as well, to make sure that we can bring permit costs down so more people are inclined to build more ADUs.
So ADUs are a state mandate. We're required to comply with the state and the state's requirement. And I think that with that, we have an opportunity to set a precedence within our community on what ADUs look like for us. and how we preserve our community, preserve our Claremont uniqueness through this process by coming up with, I think, as we look at the last question, the preservation ordinance, I think this can be, that preservation ordinance can be wrapped into the ADU process. ADU is important for the purpose of affordable housing, allowing new families, young families to come into the community. There's a lot of conversation on how does that happen. Listen, there's a lot of adults in this community, older adults in this community that had children and have grandchildren, and they want them to come into this community as well. We have to make it affordable. We have to give them opportunity to do that, and an ADU is one way to do it. And so I think there's plenty of opportunity to talk further about this particular subject after. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is for Jed, starting with Jed, on energy. There's been a lot of discussion about energy here in Claremont in recent years with our successful retrofit program, solar panel installation, and most recently at the City Council, the community choice aggregation. This is a two-part question. The first question is, should Claremont join a community choice aggregation program? And the second question is, should Claremont become a net zero community where all of its electrical energy comes from renewable sources?
The answers are yes and yes. And with regard to community choice aggregation, I was in favor of community choice aggregation when it came to City Council. Community choice aggregation is a mechanism by which you as individual customers of Southern California Edison can opt to purchase your energy supplements, your sources of energy, from a joint powers authority separate from Southern California Edison while still receiving your service and your customer and your maintenance from Edison. And with regard to net zero, if we are a community that values sustainability, we have to pursue all available policy options to reduce our carbon footprint now. And I live in the real world. I've been running a business for 10 years. I know that all of the innovation that we want right now is not available for the price we want to pay right now. But we have to pursue all options, and if we can't get them, it has to be because we tried and did not succeed.
I believe that we should have the highest ideals possible. I believe that we should pursue a net zero energy and as part of a comprehensive sustainability plan that underlies everything. I don't see the point in starting out being conciliatory. I think that we should start out with the highest ideals. And as we move forward with developments, I think we should have high expectations and clear standards that exceed sustainability expectations from the state. Because that's how we can achieve excellence, and that's how we can attract excellence as well. And to stay within the time constraints, that's where I'm going to leave it.
So I try as hard as the next person to do without energy, and I can't do it. As hard as I ride that thermostat every summer, a bill still arrives from Edison. And sometimes it's really big, and even though I'm still really hot. But my point is, if you have to use energy, why shouldn't you have the choice of where that energy comes from? To me, more choice is more better. So I'm fully supportive of the idea of community choice aggregation. You know, Edison can deliver the energy, but if you want to choose an energy source that's more sustainable, that's your choice. If you want to pay a little more for that, that's your choice. But I think people should have the option. I read with interest the editorial that was recently in the Courier about net zero goals as relates to Village South. I think it's a great idea. I also happen to think there's probably a lot of grant funding available in the solar sector for making this affordable for homeowners, for businesses, and I think the city and Sustainable Claremont can be conduits for that kind of education to steer people towards the idea that, hey, turns out your roof can actually get you away from Edison altogether. I'd love that.
I was knocking on doors on Berkeley, I think 2 days ago or yesterday, and folks expressed frustration because they signed up to get solar energy and didn't see the immediate costs going down. They didn't really understand how it benefited them. Everything needs to be linked to, a lot of the environmental issues that we're facing has to be linked to a financial incentive for people to be motivated and then to fully understand how long that's going to take. So for solar energy, he still hasn't seen his prices go down. So any program that we look into, any program that we want to implement in this city, we need to make sure that we are empowering our third-party organizations like Sustainable Claremont and make sure that we have strong information sessions and being very clear and candid and honest about what it can do and what it will not do. Because if there is disappointment with the program, people will unsubscribe and it won't work. And I think that's really, really huge. About net zero, I read the same article in the Courier. I am 100% in love with that article. I think that net zero is huge, and I think we need to continue, as Jen said, continue to have our ideas as high as possible and keep reaching for them.
I am in favor of community aggregation. As a matter of fact, Claremont has already made the decision and has joined the Clean Power Alliance, along with a number of other municipalities in Southern California. That includes that the city itself will be transitioning its power to, under the Clean Power Alliance, to 50% renewable energy. That will also allow later next year for our community to do the same and be able to move to an opportunity in which you can get clean power, renewable power at 50% levels, 35% levels, or 75% levels. So there's a huge opportunity to not only save, but incentivize. I will tell you at the 50% mark, the city will be saving 6% of its energy budget by moving to this renewable clean power alliance. I think there's opportunity for grant funding in regards to net zero, in regards to within our own community buildings. I think there's an opportunity for grant and opportunity to incentivize our residents.
The community aggregation, it sounds like a good idea. I think we need to look into the details of it. As I say, the devil's in the details, and something that looks attractive on the surface may not be so attractive when you dig into it. So I would just put that caveat to that. As far as net zero goes, the city can, in its own administration, can work toward net zero if it makes financial sense. As far as private property owners go, I'm going to leave it up to them to decide what they want to do with their own property.
Thank you so much. And just a quick follow-up question by show of hands. Our audience here wants to know, how many of you have solar panels on your homes or an EV or alternative fuel vehicle?
Does chirp count?
I rent.
I rent too.
My EV is on order.
Okay, thank you.
I ride my work.
I run everywhere.
I'm going to combine a couple of questions, and these relate to development. Actually Jennifer will be the first one to start. Should the colleges and/or residential development be allowed to build taller buildings than is currently allowed in order to prevent encroaching into historic neighborhoods? In other words, should development and expansion be allowed to go up or only out?
There's a housing crisis in California, and Claremont has to do its part. I think that development should be able to go up instead of out. But I think that our community planning process should stay in place and be very careful to keep in the guidelines of the neighborhoods and to hold heritage and preservation in mind, and also to hold sustainability in mind. And I think that these are situations that could be a yes and rather than a either or in terms of providing more housing options.
I think scale is really important, particularly in Claremont, and that we need, while going up a little bit, is probably acceptable. Like I spent 2 years living in Fawcett Hall at Claremont McKenna. It's one of those ugly red things on 6th Street. And I've always thought they're a bit of a blight and an eyesore. And I wouldn't like to see more of them, even though one of them's named after Jennifer's dad. No offense. They don't appeal to me architecturally, and they really stand out. I can even see them on the top of Potato Peak. And I don't want to see that as being the skyline of Claremont. I don't think that really fits with our heritage. But at the same time, I know we have some demands and we don't have a lot of space. And so I think we need to work together to figure out sort of how far we're willing to go. I don't think we need to be totally inflexible or rigid about that because, like I said, we're facing a housing crisis. And if we don't respond to it, it's going to be imposed upon us. This is not something that we're going to escape. So we need to be a part of that process and think about what works for Claremont. And I think there's an answer to that question.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I agree with both Jen and Zach. I think it's a case by case, and I think if you give me different scenarios to look at, I would look at that and then collaborate and have a consensus building conversation. And I think I just want to focus on that, is that we have a planning commission, we have an architecture, okay, can't get that word out, commission. We have various community groups that evaluate and review and then report on. And I think my biggest goal is to make sure that there's not one pocket or one neighborhood that is defining what the rest of the city looks like, but working overtime to make sure that there are other neighborhood pockets that maybe aren't normally involved in this discussion about what our city looks like, and making sure we draw them out and get them to engage. So if they want to have if they have an opinion on South Village, or if they have an opinion on KGI, that, like I said, I don't want to just hear from one pocket that is, completely the most vocal. I want to get into Claremont South and those other pockets and see what they have to say to make sure anything we decide is a citywide decision and not just one neighborhood decision.
So the question that's being asked is in regards to the colleges and allowing the colleges to build up. This community talks a lot about college creep. And I think there's an opportunity to allow some height in select areas of the colleges. I think we could be creative with it. I'm not sure that this community and our heritage would allow large, tall buildings at our main thoroughfares. But I think there's an opportunity to do it within the campus and be creative and balanced with it. The Planning Commission, the Architectural Commission can be involved in that process to make sure that we're maintaining and preserving our uniqueness and our heritage. But I do believe that we need to have open dialogue about it with our community, with the colleges, so that we can all achieve the same outcomes through open communication.
Bottom line, I'm not in favor of going up. In fact, we've been through this discussion recently in regard to Village South. It's sort of a microcosm of the whole discussion, and we went around and around on this. The original project that was brought to us envisioned 3 to 5 stories in virtually the entire area, and there was a lot of pushback to that, and we got it, well, I'll say toned down considerably, to the point where as we finalize those goals and guiding principles documents, it's basically going to be envisioning now 1 to 3 stories with a possible occasional 4th floor use if it's extremely innovative and extremely unique. It's really going to have to sell itself, but otherwise, essentially 1 to 3 stories, and I think that's in keeping with Claremont's character and feel and traditions and looks, and that's it.
This is a really interesting question. I think that the best thing that you can do to preserve neighborhoods is be flexible. A couple months ago, a friend of mine walked me around the neighborhood where El Barrio Park is, and he showed me where the first Catholic church in Claremont used to stand. And I don't want to see a church like that ever removed ever again. And I think in order to prevent something like that from happening, we have to be willing to listen to any proposals to ensure that nobody encroaches on neighborhoods going forward.
All right, the next question is on water, and we'll be starting with Zach this time. As you all probably know, we've been in a drought in Southern California for well over a decade, and recently Claremont has had very interesting and dynamic relationship with its water rights and water provider. The question is, would you have voted for Measure W? And what will you do to advocate for our community's water rights in the future?
Well, I voted for Measure W. I was here, voted for it, and had high hopes and was disappointed. In fact, I feel like the waterworks are starting just thinking about this whole process all over again because we had really high expectations and goals. I think the community really came together. It was a pretty lopsided vote. Everyone thought this is a great idea. The public ownership of the utility, the idea that rates will go down in time. It seemed to be, a great plan, but it didn't come together. And I would say, I don't think we should be afraid of criticism because I think we have to learn from our mistakes. And I think there was some mistakes made. And I think one of the things that we have to learn from all of that is that if we're going to take on big projects like that, if we're going to be ambitious and progressive and take on huge multi-million-dollar tasks, that we're up to that task. That we have a council that's ready to take it on, that we have a staff that's engaged and sweating the details. So when the citizens stand up and ask for something big and difficult to attain, that you have a council that's ready to take things like that on. And I'll do that on the city council, I promise you.
I would have voted no. I was out of the country, or out of the state at that time. I was in South Carolina. But I would have voted no because I didn't like the premise of the bill. I didn't like the idea of transferring over and transitioning into another company. And I didn't think it was a wise idea. And I didn't like how eminent domain was stretched loosely to make a convincing argument that we needed to do it and that we could do it. I think a lot of our water issues, and the argument that I will make, is that it's conservation and our day-to-day conservation, how we reuse water and how we think about water that can bring down our costs. If you're thinking about your toilet water, if you're thinking about your washer water, and thinking about how to direct that water and reuse that water, for me, I think that would have been a more honest conversation about how we can, as individuals, bring our costs down. And I think, again, as I've said throughout the night, that would have required an outreach strategy and an aggressive outreach strategy so people understand how they can go about and do those things.
So like over 70% of our community, I did vote yes on Measure W. I thought it was a great plan, an opportunity to see some financial gain in decades to come, but more importantly, be able to control as a community the source of life. Water is a matter that is important to our community, important to the preservation of life. And I think there's opportunities in which to continue this process, despite the outcomes of Measure W, to continue this process down the road as we look at other opportunities and other cases that happen throughout the state. But in the meantime, we need to do our part. We need to do our part to conserve water, whether that be rain barrels, whether that be part of the MS4, stormwater reuse. There's an opportunity to use, conserve our water and be more effective with what water we do have.
I did vote for Measure W. I was on the Yes on W campaign. I was on the editing committee. We drafted a lot of letters and flyers. The concept for purchasing the water system from Golden State was a sound one, and for very valid reasons. The Golden State costs were dramatically higher than all of our surrounding areas, and it was for very sound reasons that we made the attempt. It was unfortunately unsuccessful, and that sort of ties in with with the future water rights that was referenced in the question. If that means, are we going to go back and try and buy it again? At the moment, we are sort of stuck for about 12 years unless we want to pay Golden State their entire legal fees, which would be about $5 or $6 million, I believe, up front, and then we can go try it again. Otherwise, we have negotiated with them sort of a reduced payment plan already.
I voted for Measure W, and as a matter of policy, I supported it then, and I would support opportunities for local control now. But we're constrained legally. We can't pursue that anymore, and we have to honor the agreement, the terms of our settlement. But maybe going forward, we should stop thinking about the purchase of water going into the front of our houses and what we do to reuse and recycle water leaving the back of our houses. Maybe we can start thinking about how we recapture our own water and reuse it. Maybe we can start thinking about how we can conserve some of that, and rather than pumping more through the main line, find other ways to use it a second or third time. And I think that the water case, we pursued the right policy. I think it was a legal failing. It was a failure in the courtroom. And going forward, if we're embattled in litigation, I think having a lawyer on the city council would really inform that dialogue.
I voted yes for Measure W. I think that in the position we are in now, we have we have the opportunity to take stock of what went awry besides what happened in court. That could then be reflected in our contracts and also in our policies and best practices moving forward. We do have to oblige the contracts that we're in. So that is, I guess at this point, like 11 years away from trying to pursue it. In the meantime, I think there's a lot of ways that we could be better stewards of our groundwater. I think there's all kinds of amazing opportunities to collaborate with municipal water, LA Municipal Water, that's what it's called, right? And I think that Golden State would be willing to work on a water reclamation or a groundwater infiltration project.
Thank you. The next question will go to Mike, and it is also a combination of a couple of questions. In the last 2 decades, the colleges have purchased over 200 single-family homes in and around the village. What is your position on the continued expansion and encroachment of the colleges across College Avenue, buying up single-family residences in Arbol Verde and purchasing residences that removes them from the possibility of families that may want to move to Claremont and potentially could remove them from the tax rolls? What is your position on that?
I'm not a fan. I think that we need to hold, I love the colleges. I went to Pitzer College. The schools were really good to me. I learned a lot, but I think we need to think about, as Zach has pointed out several times, we need to think about how we're going to get ahead of the curve when the state starts hammering down on us. If the schools continue to acquire more and more land, it's going to make it harder for people to live here. It's already hard enough for some of our lowest income earners in Claremont South. If you go to Vista Precinct, if you go into Claremont South Precinct, and if you have conversations with the voters who live there, they will tell you that even affording a home that's worth $350,000, $400,000 is becoming increasingly difficult because their wages and their cost of living has stayed stagnant for years. And I think the school, for being a progressive and academic environment, needs to be more cognizant of how it's going to impact this community versus looking out for its own ambition. Thanks.
So I think one of the reasons the colleges are purchasing these homes throughout our community is they're limited on where they can go. We talked about it earlier about would we allow the colleges to go up versus out. That's a question this community is going to have to continue to ask itself and continue to determine what is important. Do we allow and regulate them from going out and let them go up, or do we allow them to go out and lose opportunity for new families, young families, and impact our budget. Every home they pick up, we lose that revenue. Our budget is constrained as it is to pay for a lot of social services, operational costs, and important programs. So we as a community are going to have to make a tough decision. The colleges are going to grow. So what are we going to do to meet them halfway and to partner with them on this expansion?
I understand why the colleges are doing it, because they need places for visiting faculty to stay and that sort of thing. But I am not in favor of that, and I'm not a fan of that, because it does, once again, it changes the character of our neighborhoods. It brings people in who are sometimes just sort of transitory. They'll be here for a year, maybe two, and then they're gone again. And it is not a good trend, I don't think. If these homes are not used for institutional purposes, they I would expect, still remain on the tax roll. So that's not really an issue, unless they attempt to convert it to an institutional use for their offices or as a conference center or something like that. But if they continue to be residential, but nevertheless they are deleted from our housing stock for just the general public. And as we were talking about earlier with ADUs, people are trying to move here, and the more that go off the market, and the fewer people will have an opportunity.
This goes back to the question that we answered 3 or 4 questions ago, which is, do you want to build up or out? And I think that the continuous acquisition of residences in our community are a result of our not being flexible. And if we can create flexible policies that allow them to grow, the colleges are going to grow. Let's make that clear right now. And I can't fault them for that. Their jobs is to grow their institutions. In order to grow their institutions, they need classrooms with desks, and they need dorms with beds, and they need offices with office space. And that's going to happen. So maybe we can pursue more flexible policies so that they don't find our single-family residences, housing units, as a place to do that.
It's my understanding about the 5 Cs that they are intentionally small. They are intentionally small and are collaborative together. The idea that the colleges are turning into like gigantic institutions, I think is overstated. I think if we're going to restrict homeowners from selling to the colleges who will use those homes for visiting faculty and staff, who are also people who have families, I think that then we also have to, that also moves into, are we selling to people who are buying homes to rent them out? Which is also something that's happening. I think that the best solutions can be made here by having civil, open, continuous conversations with the leaders of the individual schools. And the colleges want Claremont to be terrific too. These are, the colleges aren't separate from Claremont. We're neighbors. Thanks.
Absolutely, Jennifer. I totally agree. I disagree with the premise of the question. First off, I don't like the colleges, this gray, brooding omnipresence in the sky. There are several colleges, and they have their own boards of trustees and their own unique missions and their own character. We shouldn't think about them as the colleges. We should think about their uniqueness. And let me say something about buying these houses. I live in one of these houses, and you know what? It makes it more affordable for me to be in Claremont. And you know another thing? There's lots of families that live in the Arbol Vitae neighborhood that live side by side with long-term residents like Johnny Dominguez and Lydia Henry, who are friends of mine, and we live in the same neighborhood. I'll tell you another thing. I know at Claremont McKenna, the college that I work for, we incentivize people to remain in Claremont. Of all my friends, and there's been 3 already in the last 3 years that have left the Arbol Vitae neighborhood, Claremont McKenna has given them $100,000 to buy a home in Claremont and stay here and raise their kids. And they all have. This is not an us or them proposition. I think the question is kind of a result and related to the kind of stale dialogue that exists between the colleges and the community. I want to play a role in improving that and showing each side how they benefit each other.
All right. We have time for one last question this evening, and then we will move into our final statements. The last question is, we've been talking a lot about sustainability and heritage tonight, about preserving our history of what we know Claremont to be, and about planning our resources for the future. What would Claremont, if you could dream it up, what would Claremont look like in 30 years? And we're going to start with Ed.
Boy, it sounds like a loaded question. No. The 30 years from now, you know, I talked about it earlier about maintaining our sensibility, our community sensibility. I think there's an opportunity to continue that 30 years from now. I think there's an opportunity to continue being a small college town. I think there's an opportunity to continue to maintain our history. Development will happen. We saw it back in 1870 when they were advertising and providing people $1 train rides to come out to check out Claremont and check out the property here in Claremont. We maintained that small town feel then. We maintain that small town feel now, over 100 years later. And I think we can continue to maintain and preserve what we believe is unique to our community 30 years from now.
We might start by reflecting back 30 years from today, back to 1988. And what has changed in Claremont since 1988? Well, a fair amount has changed. You know, I mean, we have the village expansion, we have a museum thing going in. We have a whole bunch of condos up on Baseline, but for a lot of the city, it's still pretty much the way it was in 1988. So looking ahead another 30 years, I'm sort of hoping not a whole lot or not too much more will have changed in the next 30 years. You know, granted, you know, the open lots that are still available around town will probably be built up by then. There probably won't be any left, like, you know, Foothill and Monte Vista, that'll probably be built up, and the Village South, I'm sure, will be going by then. But I'd like my kids and my grandkids to be able to sort of experience the same Claremont I've been able to experience, and it would be a real shame if it didn't, if it turned out that they wouldn't be able to.
That's an excellent question, and I have an idea what I want Claremont to look like in 30 years, but it's what I want it to look like now. I want it to be beautiful. I want it to be safe. I want it to have well-preserved historical buildings. I want it to have huge, beautiful trees that provide us shade and cool our streets and our sidewalks. I also want it to be inclusive and forward-thinking about the future and welcoming to new people of all walks of life. And actually in 30 years, hopefully by then, we'll have a Masters champion because my son's going to win the Masters one day.
Claremont's gotten better in the last 30 years. And so I would assume that Claremont will keep getting better. We have Village West, Village South will be built. Not all of the developments that have gone up with the kind of care, but those kind of things don't have to be repeated. So we have valuable lessons to learn from. I see a town where we have a diverse housing stock. I see a town where, just like 30 years ago, the most significant way that Claremont has gotten better is I see that Claremont has become more forward-thinking. I feel like Claremont will move forward in sustainability. I believe that we'll be better at capturing water and be better stewards of our groundwater. I believe that I think that things are going to get better, and I think that we will do our part to address the humanitarian issues that face us. And I'd like to be a part of that.
Like many of you, I read Judy Wright's History of Claremont, and one of the interesting things about that book is how many things about the character of the community have persisted through the ages. And so when I think about 30 years from now, or 30 years ago, or 100 years ago, I think the thing that I wouldn't like to see change about Claremont are our values. And one of those values is what's being represented by this room right here. You know, dating back to those first Congregationalists and their sort of direct democracy. We need to volunteer, get involved, and take care of our community. And I think that's one of the really awesome, distinguishing characteristics of our town that I wouldn't like to see changed. And you know what? Those other details will take care of themselves. An active and engaged citizenry here, residents of Claremont, coming together, recognizing our unique character, seeking to preserve it and yet improve it, because I agree, it has improved. I mean, when I compare Claremont in the mid-90s when I first arrived here till now, I think it is actually an even nicer place to live. And I want to be part of that history. I want to be part of that past and the future on the Claremont City Council.
I imagine a family of 4 coming in on the Gold Line, visiting this city, being greeted by a resident who has lived here for 30, 40 years, and says, I'm going to take you through the community. I'm going to show you the Victorian homes that we've maintained. I'm going to show you the craftsman homes that we've maintained. I'm going to show you where Peter Drucker used to live in the patio community that we have built and that we have sustained over the course of this city's lifetime. I'm going to show you the acres and acres of land that we created solar energy, where we led the region in renewable energy. I'm going to show you the niche businesses that we fought for. We never allowed a Chili's into this community, and we kept making sure that we had creative and innovative businesses that thrived. We were able to take care of our community. And then after that individual sees everything and they're inspired, and they head to the botanical gardens and they head to the Claremont trails, and they're those self-funded and those beautiful places that we have protected over the next 30 years. They want to live here, and they're able to live here because it's affordable. And that's what I want to see in 30 years.
All right, so we can all take a breath. The questions are done. Candidates, it's now time to begin your closing comments, and we're actually going to start with Jennifer at the end and come in reverse order back toward me, from Jennifer to Jed and all the way back to Zach. So you each have a minute for closing statements. Jennifer, you can begin.
Thank you, Steve. So in opening statements, I tried to talk about myself. It didn't go so well. I think I'm just going to own the fact that I don't really like doing it. I know Claremont very well. I grew up here. I raised my own family here. I'm an active part of this community. I get a great amount of joy serving in this community. And I'd like to be a part of its future. And so I hope that you will vote for me on November 6th, or before, absentee ballot. I offer something different, and I believe that I will be a unique asset to our city council.
I want to say thank you to our moderators from Sustainable Claremont and Claremont Heritage. I want to thank all of you for the excellent questions. And I just want to close my remarks with, this election is about a lot of different issues and a lot of different things, but it is fundamentally a question of 2 critical issues. Whom do you want to be the responsible steward of dealing with the problems of now? And who do you want to offer a vision for the future? And I believe that through my professional qualifications, through my community advocacy, through my upbringing, my critical thinking skills, and my ability to communicate, I am ready to take on the challenges that we face right now, while also thinking of progress for the future. My name is Jed Leano. I need your vote on November 6th. Thank you very much.
I'd also like to thank the two organizations that put this on, and thank you again for coming tonight. We've heard a lot about Claremont, about where we are today, about where we've been, about where we want to go, what we're thinking about these days. And I've given you a lot of my ideas and my thoughts and my visions. And if you agree with me, I would really appreciate your vote on November 6th or on your absentee ballot. And once again, thank you for coming tonight.
So we heard a lot of ideas tonight, and I think the way to get through some of these things is to collaborate and work together. We need to work together and to be successful against the upcoming sustainability and other challenges that we are going to face as a community. I have a unique perspective as a candidate. For the last 20 years, I've been working in this community as a volunteer leader, whether it be through after-school programs, whether it be on my role as in the commission, or whether it be in the community since the late 90s. I have a unique perspective as a candidate for the last 23 years in running my business, starting with a vision, going from my vision, executing that vision into becoming an innovative entrepreneur. Going from innovative entrepreneur to steering a ship every day and a budget and revenue, increasing revenue. A budget is what's going to be needed to achieve the missions and goals that we've heard tonight in regards to sustainability and heritage for our community. And I look forward to doing that in the future, and I ask for your vote November 6th.
No, this one. I get it right this time. This tonight was an interesting forum for me. It's my third forum as a candidate, and if you know anything about my background, I've done 10 years of being someone who has groomed candidates and helped them run for office. And one of the things that I promised myself if I was going to run was that I was going to live up to an ideal that I'd be honest, as much as I can as a human being can be honest, and that I would speak to you, to the voter, candidly and from the heart. I spoke today, and I know there was a couple of things that I disagreed on or that may have been popular in the past, but I do think that there have been opportunities missed with the water, with the police station, with our ability to get more sustainability, to empower our third-party organizations, our nonprofits that are working endlessly, and give you an honest assessment of where we're at. Because if we don't, then we're not going to be able to know what the problem is and learn how to work together collectively. I want to make sure that this whole city is working together, not just the folks that show up to these events, but the individuals who are working 2, 3, 4 jobs, and get them involved as well too. So thank you.
I want to thank Sustainable Claremont and Claremont Heritage for giving me this opportunity. It's a unique and valuable opportunity to reach each and every one of you. That's what this election's all about, us communicating with you. And I hope that tonight, through my answers and through this dialogue that we've had together here with you asking questions and us responding, that you've had a chance to make some judgments, maybe preliminary judgments about who you're going to vote for on November 6th. I hope you're considering me. I hope you're thinking that I'm ready to take on the challenges of this city council, because there's many challenges ahead. Timing is everything. We've got some big things coming up about the budget, about development in Village South. Obviously, sustainability and preservation are going to be a big part of both of those things. You know, as chair of Traffic and Transportation, as a member of Claremont Heritage Board, I'm ready to take on those challenges. I want to invite you to come out to my kickoff. It's on Sunday. It's at the historic Garner House patio. Learn more about my candidacy. Have some free tacos. Maybe have a little fun. And maybe, I hope, earn your trust, earn your vote on November 6th. Thanks.
All right, let's give these folks a round of applause. I just have a couple of announcements. First, I want to thank all the people who helped make this event a success. I mean, this is why I moved to Claremont, was because I see a lot of familiar faces out there and folks who really care about what our city becomes. And I want to thank, most importantly, the League of Women Voters, who are really the brain trust behind how we do these things effectively. So, and our timers. I want to thank our volunteers, both from Sustainable Claremont and Claremont Heritage. You've seen them in the t-shirts tonight. They helped you this evening make sure your questions got up front. So thank you so much for your help. I want to thank all of you for all of your questions, and I apologize if we weren't able to get to every one of them. There's a stack over here that I wasn't able to reach, but the candidates do have a table out in the lobby, and I'm sure they will stick around for a while if you want to ask them some private questions. Really encourage you to do that. I also want to mention a couple of events that are coming up. If you liked what you heard tonight, if there were issues that were curious to you, programs, opportunities, just ways to get more involved in sustainability and preservation, come and talk to me or David. There's the 36th annual Claremont Heritage Home Tour coming up on October 14th from 10 to 4 p.m. And that'll be starting at the Gardner House in Memorial Park. Sustainable Claremont's annual gala is on October 2nd at 6 p.m. and that'll be up at the Padua Hills Theater. And SC, we're launching our first film series, and we'll actually be screening a film, The Need to Grow, at the Lemley Theater on October 11th at 7 p.m. Really encourage you to come out to all of those events. Come and ask us if you have questions about how to get involved. You can visit our websites. There's just a lot of ways to be an active community member here in Claremont in addition to voting. And with that, I will encourage you, if you have not registered to vote yet, outside some of our Pomona College students have volunteered tonight to help you with that. And remember, get out there and vote on Election Day. Thank you so much for coming out.